Hey guys, and welcome back to RBR, and today we're looking at the first of two SUVs to come into Mercedes compact family of cars, and this is a kind of unexpected one. This is the GLB. Now in the past we've had the GLA, of course, which was more of a fat version of the A-Class, I guess, more of a hatchback crossover SUV. But this, as you can see, much more traditional in shape, and it's in fact got the option of the 7 seats. So today we are looking at the first AMG version, and that is the GLB 35. Today's episode of RBR is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. We love games and films, as you know, at RBR, so it's great to have today's episode sponsored by an RPG game that's not cutesy or cartoony, but something that's real, dark, raw, and epic like a movie. Shadow Legends takes you to a world of dark fantasy and realism and allows you to play console-level graphics on your phone and on your desktop PC in an RPG filled with champions who you can upgrade and go through a full voiced-over story mode campaign. I think that's my favourite part of the game. I much prefer story modes, and I love the fact that this game is actually voiced over properly. In the video description you'll find some special links, and if you're a new player you will get 100,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 day EXP booster, and a free champion, the Executioner. All this treasure will be waiting for you here. The rewards will be available only for the next 30 days and only for new players. The game is cross-platform, as I said, and you can find me on there as Rokan. Enjoy the game, guys, and please do support our sponsors. Now to the episode. So guys, yes, it does have the AMG specific grille. And we kind of guessed that this was going to happen back in our GLE 53 review. And I think you can pretty much count on the fact that every single AMG in the future, including the entire lineup of 35s, is going to eventually get this grille. Essentially, if it's an AMG, it's going to have this face on it. But before we delve more into this car in terms of its performance and every other aspect that makes the GLB unique, I think the first aspect that all of us think of when we see this car is, what is the actual size of it versus the plethora of other SUVs within the Mercedes range? So because this is a 7-seater car, I think the right thing to do is to start with the GLS. Now, as you can see, the GLS is pretty much the battleship that you remember it to be. It is a very large car. And in comparison to this GLB, the GLB is much smaller, but there is a bit of familiarity, particularly in the rear, between the two of these cars. But now, of course, the GLE is also available in 7 seats. So the GLE, again, much larger than this GLB, as you can see. But then when you look at the GLC, now you begin to see a very similar size of car. And in fact, the GLB is only 1 inch shorter in every area except height, where this GLB is a little bit taller. So you're looking at a GLC sized car in the A-Class family of cars that gives you the option of 7 seats. That's pretty much where the GLB sits. And of course, this is distinctly different to what we had in the past with GLA. But when you look at this car, it kind of sits a bit more upright, particularly in the front, and almost squarer and a bit more G-Wagon-like. I think when we heard of a rumoured compact car that was going to take inspiration from G, it was actually this GLB. And in fact, it harkens a bit back to the GLK that was, of course, much squarer and a car that we did not get in the UK. But now let's unpack the design of the GLB in its entirety a little bit as well. So, of course, you've got a much squarer design in this car. I think the most interesting design highlight that differentiates it from the other cars is this rear part of the window line here, which kind of edges upwards on SUV highlights on the lower lip of the front bumper as well. I do find these so-called air intakes with plastic rather annoying. Why they just can't be mesh or something that detracts from the fact that they're fake. I don't know, there must be a better way to design these. The lights are also very unique to GLB. They're a lot squarer. I feel like if they were even more square, again, they would look more similar to the G-Wagon. Speaking of G-Wagon, I think your windscreen is a bit more upright, and this was all purposely done. Now, there's quite a lot of use of black plastic trim, as is often done with SUVs in Mercedes-Benz, but perhaps even more in GLB. You've got a massive piece across the front here, across all of the arches. The side sill has a lot of black plastic with the chrome trim in it. I think this would look so much better if there was an option for having body color like you do in GLE and in the GLS. As far as the AMG version goes, specifically, of course, you get the extra chrome trims on the standard AMG line body. We've got this AMG specific grille. You get 21-inch multi-spokes, which look a lot better in silver, I think, than we saw with these, the black version of those wheels. You look at the rear of the AMG, you've got a spoiler on the top of the roof. The diffuser's got quite a large piece of chrome trim on there. Of course, that can go completely black with night package. And you've got the signature round pipes from the 35 series. The rear lights of the GLB really remind me of the GLC estate as well. Now, the GLB brings some more unique colors into the compact range. We've got Patagonia red, which is a really nice looking metallic red with a lot of sparkle in it. And there's also this new blue metallic color as well, which is quite similar to Brilliant Blue, but with a bit of a purple tinge to it. Very nice, especially on the AMG versions. Now, if you're not familiar with the 35 AMG engines, this car has got the same tune as A35 and CLA 35. So we have the 2-litre 4-cylinder engine with 306 brake horsepower, 400 Newton meters, and the 0 to 60 is 5.2 seconds. Now, this is actually pretty respectable when you think that the GLE 43 of the previous generation was about 5.6. So it's punching above its weight. And again, this is a car unique in its class. That engine links to the 8-speed DCT gearbox as well, and you even get all of the drive modes as you do in all the other 35s, and launch control race start is also standard in this car with AMG track pace. AMG have also tinkered with the car in order to make it more rigid. So we've got an aluminium shear panel under the front here. We've got extra braces as well to help with that rigidity, but that's not all. The subframe of the car is also unique to the GLB. We've got wheel carriers on the rear axle that are unique to this car. We've got different steering knuckles and control arms on the front axles as well. We've also got AMG specific variable steering rack, again, all to help make this more of an AMG than the standard GLB. Now, I don't like multitude of niches, and a lot of people will see this car as kind of brand dilution, but there is a market for this. And even two very good friends of mine who only have room for one car in their lives, but a lot of kids, they needed a car that had more seats, but a bit of sporting prowess as well. And when a car like the GLE or the X5 or the GLS, etc., are just too big, well, then this car sits in a class of its own to offer some sporting prowess for someone who needs 7 seats. Now, that's not all. In the future, amazingly, there is also going to be a GLB 45S. I don't know what to say about that. It's going to be interesting. Do you need drift mode with 7 seats and the whole family in there? I don't know. Of course, that will follow the same tune of having 421 brake horsepower if there is an S model. I've heard it might have a spoiler on the rear of the car as well, like you have in the A45. But the GLB doesn't stop there. Apparently, there's also going to be an EQB. So you've seen the EQC. This is the fully electric version of the GLB, set to be one of the next SUVs in the all-electric Mercedes lineup that is coming in the future. Again, I think we can expect, again, electric motor on the front axle and the rear axle, probably mileage of around 300 from a full charge. We'll have to see what the future holds for GLB. Now, let's head inside, see what's unique to the GLB class, and then take this car out and see just how much of an AMG it really is. Now, guys, the interior, as you expect on A-Class platform, is very much like the A-Class. But there are some areas which we're going to focus on which are unique to the GLB only, and we're not going to be exhaustive on the rest of the interior. If you want to check out what generally the A-Class platform interior is like, check out any of our A-Class or CLA reviews. Now, as far as the GLB goes, there's this very distinct part of design that flows throughout the interior, and it's having this almost aluminium cylinder with a bit milled in between it, and I'll show you what that looks like. The most prominent one is on the passenger side of the dash, but it continues on behind the steering wheel as well. We've got it on the door handle, even on the handlebar of the door here, and you can see it on the side of the center console here. And this is unique to GLB. It's just nice to have something that's unique to this car, so you know that when you jump in one, hey, it's a GLB. Now, generally, driving position is a lot higher than the rest of the A family, as you would hope it to be. but you also get a bit of hint of G-Wagon even in this car. Now the G has a very distinct windowsill that's always flat, and you could almost put a coffee cup on top of it. And the GLB is a bit reminiscent of that. You also see a lot more of the top of the dashboard, and kind of the way you sit, and the car just fires up, is again a bit more reminiscent of the G in that way. Now the second row in the rear, you actually sit quite high in, but you get loads of headroom. One of our good friends on Instagram, Ben's blogger in the USA, had one of her colleagues in the back of the car, and he was about 6'8" and still had headroom. So second row, you get a lot of space, but of course there is the option of a third row seat within the GLB, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is much more occasional seating, and you're looking at something like 10, 12-year-old kids would be very comfortable. You can still fit adults in, as you can see me and Jamie sitting in this car. However, it is a bit cramped in there. You do, however, get 2 cup holders. You get USB-C cables as well, so it is well appointed in that third row. And the third row also gives you a 40-60 split on the seats. In terms of the AMG bits, of course, you get the full AMG steering wheel, all the AMG displays as you do in the A35, the control units. What's unique to GLB 35 is you can control AMG dynamics from the steering wheel now, and it's not something that you have to do in individual, and we will see what that means later on in the drive. Now, the GLB is actually built in Mexico, so many people have asked, what is the build quality like? It is as good as A-Class. I see absolutely no different to the car's build in Rastatt. So, now, the sound of the car. There is a change in the exhaust system on the GLB 35 versus the previous 35s, and that is an extra muffler because of noise regulations within the exhaust system. So, we'll have to see what that sounds like on the run in terms of startup. With AMG Emotion Start, it sounds pretty similar to the 35. So let's take it on the run. Let's see what it feels like in terms of comfort driving and dynamic driving in this, the first 7-seat compact AMG. So there are 2 specific areas on a car like GLB 35 which can be either a comfortable 5-seater or 7-seater that you really need to hit the nail on the head on. And that is being really good at long distance cruising. And then the reason that a GLB 35 should exist, in my opinion, is, like we discussed, for that buyer who has a big family or need for more space, but wants a bit of AMG sporting in their life as well. So it's got to be able to do something dynamic and fun and emotional as well. So those are 2 kind of areas that I really want to focus on with this car, rather than regurgitating perhaps the stuff that we've done in the other 35 models. So we're going to start off with the AMG side, I think, and that is dynamic driving, and as AMG like to tout the most in their cars, driving performance. Now it's hard to discuss AMG and driving performance without talking about sound, and we found all the other 35 cars that we've driven to have even better sound than the new 45Ss. Now of course those are slightly older cars to the 45Ss, and regulations have changed since then. They are always changing, they're ongoing. So newer cars, every single new car from every new manufacturer is always quieter. So what I'm finding here with this GLB 35, I'm in manual now, Sport Plus, trying to make it play like the other 35s we've driven, which give big pops and bangs. This car isn't doing anything that I can really discern from the exhaust. I'm going to slow down slightly, I'm going to pick it up. Now if I pick up, you get a nice build up of rev, you get a nice change when you shift up a gear. But apart from that, it's missing that signature AMG pop, crackle and bang. Now see, this is problematic for me because half the experience, or we've been drilled into our heads over the last couple of decades that AMG is about emotional sound. Now with the new regulations that are being forced upon these cars, something like this, not making really that much sound, kind of depresses you as a AMG driver. So you've lost a lot of what makes an AMG an AMG. But we must remember, in a world where every single new car is now quieter, this is pretty much on a level playing field with everything else. So if you're thinking about sound, the current A35 or CLA 35, probably a much better bet, or even the shooting brake compared to this GLB, which is sad. Now, what else makes an AMG? Well, we're talking about steering, dynamics and suspension. And that's where the news is a little bit better for the GLB. Now this is a big car, as we said, it's exactly GLC size essentially. But as you would expect in most modern AMGs, the steering is still good. We've got that variable ratio electronic setup. And as we found in all their modern cars, it's good. It's quite pointy, especially for what is quite a boxy and a car that's taller than the GLC. It does, of course, feel, I think we've got a much more weighted steering compared to a A35 or the CLA 35. But for a large car, and with those suspension changes that we mentioned, dynamically it's quite good. For the first time in a 35, you can control AMG dynamics specifically from the switches, so you can sit in comfort and turn it into a more sporty setup for the steering and the suspension without affecting the engine response. There we go, we've got some nice scenery here, some twisty roads, and it handles better than what the car looks like, frankly speaking. Yeah, not bad. This car's also got the optional AMG ride control suspension, which essentially makes the car a bit more dynamic depending on what mode you're in. Do you need that in a GLB 35? Not convinced that you do. What they needed was a performance exhaust option, which they unfortunately do not have. Or even maybe AMG real sound like the 45Ss have. Right, now we're back in comfort mode. Now as a long distance cruiser, you're going to find this a lot more comfortable than the A35 or the CLA 35. The way the suspension has been specifically tuned in the GLB AMG variant is for better long distance cruising. And it makes sense if you've got 5 or 7 passengers, wherever the case may be. Again, we're talking about the people who are being targeted for this particular car. We're talking a large family who are looking for more comfort, but in something that's got a bit of AMG flavor, should the driver want it. In comfort mode, it is genuinely a proper Mercedes-Benz. And I think this is the best side of the GLB 35, which is strange because it's marketed as an AMG product. But as a long-distance cruiser, with something that can be a bit more dynamic, I like the long-distance cruiser element of this car more. Plus, then you've, of course, got the AMG styling. We can't ignore the fact that this is the first 35 with that AMG-specific grille. And it's got quite an imposing presence on the road. Now, another element about the GLB that you can't ignore is the fact that this is an actual proper SUV on the compact car platform from Mercedes. The only other one we've had until now has been the GLA, and the GLA was really just a fat hatchback version of the A-Class. You even had less headroom, and the whole thing just felt a bit strange. Whereas the GLB is a genuine SUV-sized car, both inside and outside. So for the first time in the compact class for MB, we've got a proper SUV. And again, we also must remember that there's no other car in this car's class. So you can't really get another compact SUV with 7 seats that's got some kind of specific sporting ability. But that being said, just because it's a proper SUV doesn't mean that it's a 100% genuine feeling AMG. On that side of the scale, I'm yet to be convinced that the GLB's shift to the AMG side of things was the right thing to do. I want to see if the 45S that's rumored and been spied around the Nürburgring will change my mind in the future. But generally, I think the lack of emotion that you're getting because of the numb exhaust sound, you lose half the fun that you get in the other 35 AMGs, despite the fact that dynamically, for this class of car, the GLB is actually really good. For an AMG, you need a bit more than just that grille. You need a bit of emotion, and I find that lacking in this GLB 35. As a long-distance cruiser, as something with huge road presence, it's an impressive looking thing, and it's a very, very comfortable car, even in its AMG form. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. A first look at the GLB 35. Perhaps we'll see if the UK one is a bit different, as we found with the A35. But until then, and until more versions of this car come out, including the new GLA, but until that happens, and perhaps the new GLA comes out as well, and the 45 version, please do like, subscribe, and share this video if you found it useful and enjoyable. And I'm going to shoot off into the distance as per RBR tradition.